the indigenous Crimean Tatars have suffered a particular blow. Most of them are employed in farming and agriculture. The issue is especially alarming in the Belbek Valley, where 30% of the population are Crimean Tatars. It is from the valley, from the river Kokoska, that the authorities of the peninsula plan to take order to supply Sevastopol. Such project would destroy the flora and the fauna of the valley.
В Крыму всегда были проблемы с водой. И поэтому в ментальности у крымских татар, как у коренного народа, есть очень такой вот культ воды, то есть очень бережное отношение к воде. Поэтому сам процесс, само хозяйствование, оно было связано с тем, чтобы максимально беречь воду и, соответственно, чтобы было рациональное использование воды.
The peninsula depended not only on the Dnieper water, but also on the seeds supplied by the Academy of Agrarian Sciences in Kiev. The seeds selected by breeders were well suited to the conditions of the Crimean steppe. Russian farmers have been unable to produce viable crop analogs for 6 years.
Крым – это туристический регион, Крым – это аграрный и немного промышленный. И понятно, что сельское хозяйство требует внедрение уже современных технологий. В то же русло канала можно положить трубы большого диаметра для того, чтобы не терять на дренаже и на испарении на всей протяженности канала. И самое главное, если речь идет о сельском хозяйстве, там, где очень много воды используется, то, конечно, это технологии капельного орошения, это разведение по всей степной части от магистрального канала, от водных каналов, но опять-таки все это уже в трубах, вплоть до этого капельника, так сказать, на полях.
Traditional livestock farming is what needs to be developed in the Crimean Peninsula. This was written by the Russian media in 2016. But it turns out that this industry also requires water. Fodder, alfalfa and rapeseed are the most moisture-loving crops. According to the official data of the Russian Federation, 2016 to 2017 saw the increase in meat production. This could be explained by the fact that a large number of cattle were slaughtered. Feeding them has become impossible. And then, following the livestock, there was a 35% drop in dairy production. Chicken and egg production also declined significantly in 2017.
Рассчитывать только на бизнес-структуры мы не можем. Без федеральной помощи проблемной аграрной экономики сельских территорий мы не решим. Село нуждается не в одноразовой социальной помощи, а в последовательной программе модернизации и объемном финансировании.
By 2014, Georgia was a leading farm in the Permytsky region of the peninsula. It specialized in the cultivation of vegetables. Unfortunately, currently the region suffers from an agricultural crisis.
С другой стороны, есть израильский прекрасный опыт, капельное поливное земледелие, использование крайне рационально небольших объемов воды для капельного орошения, но все это требует другого внимания. Даже не только денег, сколько просто внимания к этому вопросу, желание что-то изменить. Надо пойти по линии интенсификации сельского хозяйства, по линии того же капельного орошения, новых технологий, растениеводства, которое ориентировано на засушливые условия. И тогда мы можем от крымских земель получить максимальную отдачу. Эффективную отдачу, не нужно будет туда тянуть воду с Днепровского канала.
It would seem that the situation with fishing should be better. In the east of the peninsula, there were 14 fishing farms. The fish was grown in fresh waters. With the onset of the water shortage, more than 15,000 people lost their jobs.
Важным эпизодом была попытка обратиться в Европейский суд по правам человека, для чего россиянами был избран так называемый Крымский рыбохозяйственный комбинат, как структура, якобы пострадавшая от перекрытия воды в Крым. Это очень публично освещалось в российской прессе.
Это было предприятие так называемого закрытого типа. Из икры, которую получали здесь же, в системе прудов, выращивали малька. Затем взрослую рыбу. Карп, белоамур, щука, виды осетровых пород. Сейчас здесь степь. Использовать эту землю без пресной воды, по словам владельца бывшего рыбокомбината, невозможно. Повсюду солончаки.
Они не заплатили за него судебный сбор, после чего Европейский суд, естественно, отказал по формальным основаниям. Он и не мог не отказать. Когда они прошли все инстанции, оказалось, что просто они ни на что не рассчитывали вообще. Ни на закон, ни на что-то иное. Поэтому это, повторюсь, чистая пропаганда, как и остальные их действия.
Nowadays, only strategic Russian facilities are being provided with water that is essential for agriculture. Is there any hope for those involved in the agricultural sector?
So, those movie was done before the Russia started its criminal broad-scale aggression against Ukraine, and modern challenges that appeared in the last 2 years will be highlighted by our expert, and I give the floor to Iskander Bariev, Chairman of the Board of the Crimea Data Resource Center and Head of Department of Legal and Foreign Affairs of Majlis of Crimean Tatar People.
Thank you very much, Mr. Babin. Let's preserve the future for descendants. The Crimean Peninsula is the pearl of the Black Sea region, a place of unique ecosystem and biological diversity. Crimea has become the cradle of 3 indigenous peoples of Ukraine: Crimean Tatars, Crimean Karaites, and Krimchaks, and at the same time the place of their tragic fate. Russian imperialism for about 2.5 centuries has been trying not only to destroy the indigenous peoples in Crimea, their natural and cultural monuments, a traditional economy, but intentionally makes Crimea a militarized base to create a military threat not only in the Black Sea region, but also in the whole Europe. Unique Crimea ecosystems have been systemically degraded since the Soviet times with the development of chemical industry, for the provision of which the Agarmish Mountain Peak and Sivash have been destroyed for decades. And the current Russian occupation leads to their systemic collapse. Only during the construction of the highway Tavrida, more than 111,000 trees and 116,000 bushes were destroyed, many of which had a protected value. And residential and infrastructural objects are being built directly on natural protected areas. Crimea has always been an arid zone, and only the careful attitude of the indigenous peoples to its soils, forests, and water courses allowed to maintain the water balance and counteract desertification of the region. Irrational water usage of the occupants has created a global disruption of the balance of natural ecosystem, including underground and surface water courses. The real that the desertification of the region has intensified after the Russian troops blew up the Kakhovska hydroelectric power plant in 2023, resulting in the release of more than 18 cubic kilometers of fresh water into the sea, causing catastrophic damage to more than 40 environmental sites and territories. And the negative impact of this war crime on global warming can hardly be overestimated. In addition to undermining the hydroelectric power plant, the occupants systematically threaten to undermine the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And in the course of military operations, massively destroy in the areas injected of Crimea forest plantations that protest steep land from erosion, which have become mini files and fortresses of the aggressor, which will also inevitably lead to desertification. Russia's maritime aggression in the Black Sea, the massive use of mines and missiles, the dumping of fuel and other regions, as well as acoustic pollution of the water has already led to the mass death of marine fauna, but also a sharp increase in methane and hydrogen sulfide emissions, which have an extremely negative impact to global temperature levels. The example of the destruction of Crimea ecosystems not only emphasizes the vulnerability of the global climate balance, but also reminds of the need for full international responsibility for ecocide. Let's stop crimes against nature. Together, let's save the Earth, our common home. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Bariev, for such a short but a very ground presentation. And I give floor to Professor Yevhen Khlobostov, Doctor of Economic Science and Professor of Department of Ecology of National University Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, of Academician of the Academy of Economic Science of Ukraine, and member of Expert Council of Crimea Data Resource Center for Environmental Protection and Sustainable Development of Crimea, and as expert of the International Crimea Platform created by Ukrainian government and President Zelensky. So, Mr. Khlobostov, I give you floor. And I will translate his speech to English step by step.
Good evening. Я перепрошую, буду доповідати українською мовою, а професор Борис Бабін буде мене люб'язно перекладати. Шановні присутні, я хотів би наголосити, що кліматичні зміни відбуваються незалежно від юридичного статусу території. Однак наслідки цих змін, що відбуваються і відображаються у стані екосистем, є частиною загальної системи впливу нераціонального або хижацького ставлення до природних ресурсів. Особливо це стосується Криму, коли держава-окупант поводить себе так, нібито ці території і завтрашній день цих територій нікого не цікавить і не є предметом для піклування.
Climate change occur regardless to the legal status of the territories, but the consequences of these changes, which occur and are reflected in the state of ecosystems, are part of the general trend of influence of the irrational or predatory attitude towards natural resources, when the occupying state, as Russia is in Crimea, behaves as if the tomorrow of the territory is of no interest to no one and is allegedly not a subject of care.
Почнемо з загальних речей. Кліматичні зміни для півдня України, і, зокрема, Криму, це на загал більш вологі зими з великою мінливістю погодних умов та посушливе і спекотне літо.
Let's start with general things. Climatic change for the south of Ukraine and in particular for the Crimea, wetter winters and great variability of weather conditions and dry and hot summers.
Як це відображається на стані довкілля Криму? Ми, екологи, давно наголошуємо на необхідності адаптації до кліматичних змін та реагування на них з боку цілеспрямованої послідовної політики. Тому наша позиція поглядає у послідовному вивченні особливостей реалізації кліматичних змін для Криму та процесів розвитку екологічних викликів та небезпек, які ми спостерігаємо на всіх окупованих територіях.
How does this affect the state of Crimea's environment? We, ecologists, have long emphasized the need to adapt to climate change and to respond to it through purposeful, consistent policies. Therefore, our position consists in the constant study of the peculiarities of the implementation of climate change for Crimea and the processes of development of environmental challenges and dangers that we observe in the occupied territories.
Які екологічні проблеми викликають особливу увагу? Це, перш за все, стан природних ресурсів, їх виснаження, а також посилення екологічних небезпек, які виникають внаслідок мілітаризації півострова, наслідків перетворення Криму майже в суцільну військову базу.
What environmental problems are of particular concern? This is, first of all, the state of natural resources, their depletion, as well as the increase of environmental hazards that arise as a result of the militarization of Peninsula by Russian aggression, the consensus of the transformation of Crimea into Russia's solid military base.
Природні ресурси Криму – це вода, це унікальні екосистеми, це корисні копалини і ресурси акваторії Чорного та Азовського морів. Але що ми маємо на сьогодні?
The natural resources of Crimea are water, unique ecosystems, minerals and sources of the waters of the Black and Azov seas. But what do you have for today?
Через вплив кліматичних змін і скорочення опадів знижують водність мали річки Криму. У 2020 році навіть дві найбільших річки Криму – Салгір та Бельбек – на окремих ділянках просто зникли. Там було сухе русло. Через свідому руйнацію Каховської гідростанції зникло Каховське водосховище – найбільша штучна водойма на Дніпрі. А Дніпро – це найбільша значуща ріка України. Так от, зникнення цього водойми, що зробило навіть теоретично неможливим транспортування Дніпровської води до Криму. Але за умов пріоритетів окупантів, де військові цілі на першому місці, ці проблеми будуть стосуватися переважно більшості простих громадян Криму і стану кримських екосистем.
Due to the impact of climate change and decrease in the precipitation, the water content of Crimean rivers has decreased. In 2020, even the two largest rivers of Crimea, Salgir and Belbek, simply disappeared in some places. There was a dry riverbed. Due to the Russia's deliberate destruction of the Kakhovska hydroelectric power plant, the Kakhovska reservoir, the largest reservoir of the Dnieper River, disappeared. The Dnieper is the most significant and the largest river in Ukraine. So, the disappearance of this reservoir made it impossible to transport the Dnieper River to Crimea, and under the conditions of the Russian occupiers' priorities, their military goals are in the first place. These problems will affect ordinary citizens of Ukrainian Crimea and the state of ecosystems.
Природозаповідні об'єкти, коли вони заважають будь-яким господарським чи мілітарним проєктам, на них просто не звертають уваги. Кейс траси Таврида тому гарний приклад. 111 тисяч дерев та 116 тисяч чагарників були знищені заради проєкту, який має не стільки інфраструктурне, скільки мілітарне значення.
Natural reserve objects, when they interfere with any economic or military projects, they are ignored. The case of the Tavrida Highway is an example of this. 111,000 trees and 116,000 stumps in the project, which had primarily military significance, were destroyed by Russian occupiers. The water areas of the seas are suffering because of the war, but it is not possible to conduct research while the military danger continues and the Russian naval aggression is still going on.
Акваторії морів страждають через війну, але дослідження провести неможливо, поки триває військова небезпека. Природні ресурси Криму видобуваються без належної екологічної експертизи та оцінки наслідків видобування. Корінні народи можуть бути позбавлені природних ландшафтів, які складають нематеріальну спадщину кримських татар, караїмів та кримчаків.
Crimea's natural resources are extracted without proper environmental expertise and evaluation on the consequences of extraction. Indigenous peoples may be deprived of natural landscapes that constitute the intangible heritage of the Crimean Tatars, Karaites and Krimchaks.
Тільки стабільна безпека в Чорноморському регіоні дозволить поставити піклування про довкілля Криму на належний рівень, а досягнення цієї цілі неможливо без підтримки світового співтовариства. Жодна держава в регіоні не має права порушувати територіальну цілісність, розв'язувати війну, знищувати природні ресурси. Сталий розвиток регіону можливий тільки в результаті наших спільних зусиль.
Only stable security in Black Sea region will allow taking care of Crimea's environment at the proper level, and achieving this goal is impossible without the support of the international community. No state in the region has the right to violate territorial integrity, start a war, destroy natural resources. Sustainable development of the region is possible only as a result of our common and joint efforts. So, thank you, Professor Hlobesta, for such ground speech, and I will connect this situation, practical challenges in areas of Crimean and regional environment with relevant legal framework as international law do exist, and our government demands to execute international law, and peaceful formula of President Zelensky contains the key steps to make punishment for guilty, to make responsibility for violations and make compensations regarding those issues. But let us discuss about what are the main framework, what are the main practical possibilities of modern international law and international development. How can it be compared with the challenges in areas of climate change? And this research may be started from the international humanitarian law. As we have war conflict in Ukraine, Hague Convention, Geneva Convention are applied to. And of course, illegal attacks on environments are banned by those conventions. And of course, hunger as a weapon is also banned. And de facto, hunger is the next step of, for example, dehydration, for example, desertification of the Ukrainian South. And now we see the situation in the African and Asian states when the situation of world food security is dependent on the level of Ukrainian soils and the level of Ukrainian ecosystem that have influence to the agricultural system. That's why Russian attacks to Ukrainian environment also have a direct impact to all global level, and this is also covered by international humanitarian law. And part, last but not least, as actors on the commercial shipment banned by the Hague Convention, as pollution of Black and other seas regarding those illegal attacks is also a part of climate changes. As we described it today before, Black Sea is unique. It contains a sulfur dioxide in water, and it contains a lot of methanium on the ground. Any modern military activities create risks of emissions of milliards of cubic meters of sulfates and methanes from Black Sea, and it have a direct impact to global environment. But coming back to the international humanitarian law, are there any mechanism now that is possible to be implemented in this area? We're speaking about Red Cross and we're speaking about relevant humanitarian activities, but Red Cross is not very close to the ecologic issues. Maybe the future civil society activities and international structures may make it more closer regarding the implementation of Geneva Conventions to the demands of ecologic law. And the next block is international criminal law. Here we have Roma Statute. And Roma Statute bans the crimes against ecology during the war conflict and determine it as a part of war crimes. And here we have a challenge, as Ukraine allies did not ratify Roma Statute on this moment, and we hope it will happen soon. Also, as other states of region are ratifying states of the Roma Statute, a member of the International Criminal, they are members of the International Criminal Court, it may create the situation when such crimes may be investigated not only, for example, in the ICC in Hague, but also in framework of the universal jurisdiction. Some countries that are participants of the modern international criminal law system may start regarding relevant proceedings if they establish that war crimes against ecology have high-level risks, not only for Ukrainian ecosystem, but also for regional ecosystem, for Black Sea ecosystem, and, for example, for global warming. And also we have two other issues connected with Rome Statute. Genocidal aspects, as genocide is de facto a goal of Russian aggression in Ukraine. Russia's activities against Ukraine's ecosystem in some aspects have also genocidal features. And for example, it may be clear determined after Kakhovka hydroelectric power station was destroyed by Russians. As regions of the lower Dnieper River is not only extremely important for ecosystem of the Black Sea and all Black Sea region, it's a core place of Ukrainian ethnic origin settlement. And destruction of this unique ecosystem have genocidal features. And at the same time, as it have negative impact to the Crimean ecology system, it has also negative impact to the development and sustainable development of the Crimean Tatar indigenous people. And as the Crimean Tatar indigenous people is repressed by Russian Federation, it was proved by some international decisions, here we also may see some genocidal aspects. And from other step, if we are speaking about aggression and ecology, Now, LS, we see no special tribunal created by treaty or created by a special UN decision. But it don't close the issue of responsibility for aggression. And in discussions between lawyers, between international researchers, we point that there is no any immunities for any person regarding crime of aggression. And if the aggression causes negative ecological consequences, if aggression makes risks for global warming, such criminal proceeding with such crime may be started on national level from any person, including heads of governments, including heads of states. And also we had to speak about ecocide. Ecocide is a very popular word in these modern discussions, but else there is no conventional ban of ecocide, and else there is no conventional determination of crime of ecocide. But as Second World War and criminal international crimes of Nazism created the concept of genocide as humanity's response to such crimes, today Russian Nazis' crimes in Ukraine may create, as we think, full conventional concept of ecocide crime as response to Russian crimes in Ukraine. So this is a very ambitious goal to have conventional fixation of ecocide crime. But I think if activity of civil society will be strong, this goal may be achieved in next years. And last but not least is international human rights law. If you're speaking about ecosystems, if you're speaking about risks for ecology, some human rights are connected directly with it. For example, if you're speaking about the practice of European Court of Human Rights, American Court of Human Rights, and UN committees, right to life is connected with ecology. In some cases, in European Court of Human Rights are connected with risks for ecology and environment. So I think it may be a strong next step when the decision that are expected from the European Court of Human Rights will fix that even in the modern conventional framework, without additional conventional establishment, the right to sustainable development, the right to clean environment, even the modern fundamental rights protected by the International Convention may be guarantees for the protection of the ecological rights as a person, so people, including indigenous people, if you're speaking about the Crimea and its attempted annexation by Russia. As indigenous peoples has rights as for unique ecosystems of their traditional lands and aquatoriums, and they have right to demand. They have right to demand the safety of such ecosystem. And such right to demand also may be a part of relevant international legal proceedings. So, other human rights now heavily discussed in the UN soft law system. For example, UN special rapporteurs and working groups are discussing about right to food, right to water, right to health. But this concept also now under influence of Russian aggression. And this right should be enforced, including the part of the ecological framework, including the issues of such crimes as we determine now as ecocide. Because in Ukraine, in our national criminal law, as in 20 other states of the world, we have ecocide crime, but we don't have it on the international level. And also I should remind you about the international maritime law, as Russia's naval aggression and Russia's criminal usage of Crimea as a base for further attacks on Ukrainian mainland and for the shipment in the Black Sea area is a brutal violation of international maritime law. And if we're speaking about the defense of maritime ecosystem, I may remind you that we have some resolution of International Maritime Organization, and 2 days ago, Russia was not re-elected as a member of the Executive Committee of the International Maritime Organization. And it was first time after this organization was created. And 2 years ago, International Maritime Organization adopted the resolution C35 and established special monitoring mechanism regarding the issues of the Black Sea area, including maritime environment issues. And some civil society structures, including Crimea Tatar Resource Center, including Association of Integration of Crimea, informed International Maritime Organization sustainably about such Russia's violations. And that's why I think the issues of maritime proceedings, including the ongoing arbitrary case Ukraine against Russia, that contains some issues of ecological dispute, but it don't cover the situation of broad-scale aggression, is also important. Of course, some other aspects of international law are fruitful for next counteraction Russia's illegal acts against ecology. For example, we may speak about international investment law and bilateral investment treaty of 1999, but this treaty was stopped some months ago, but some previous Russia's illegal destructions may be covered by relevant international arbitrary proceedings. And we are speaking about international security law as ecological aspects and global warming may be now determined as a tool of war. Russian propagandists don't hide that global warming is a goal of Russian Federation. They directly say that allegedly global warming will help Russia be more powerful, allegedly have more infrastructural possibilities, and allegedly have more agricultural results. That's their public statements. And I think if Russia chooses climate as a weapon, if Russia chooses global warming as a weapon, we must stop it on all international platforms, including such specialized, like in area of security, like Organization of Security Cooperation in Europe and others. So we may discuss by hours regarding the legal issues of counteractions, the Ecocide and other ecological crimes and violations by Russia and Ukraine, made by Russia and Ukraine. But I give floor to the next speaker, and next speaker is Natalia Holodova, project manager at the non-governmental organization Ecoclub. Natalia, the floor is yours. Natalia, do you hear us?
Good evening, everyone. I will share my screen. Is it okay now?
Yes, we do hear you.
Good. My name is Natalia Holodova. I am a project manager at the environmental organization Ecoclub from Ukraine. Ecoclub has been working on energy and climate issue for over the 25 years. Our mission is to save environment by influencing policies and strengthening communities. Communities in Ukraine now include cities and villages and associations of villages. And since the start of the decentralization reform in 2015 and until the war, they were relatively independent territorial units with more than 1,400 communities in all Ukraine. So they had the power, responsibility, money, and willingness to make changes. So for us as NGO, it is very efficient to work with authorities on the local level. And since the beginning of the full-scale war, energy topic has become the priority for our organization. Despite all sanctions, Russia still has money to finance the killing of Ukrainians, and one of the main Russian targets is the energy infrastructure. Due to Russian aggression, over 50% of thermal, 30% of solar, and 90% of wind generation are either damaged, destroyed, or occupied. This presents a significant challenge to our energy security. And adding to the complexity, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has been under occupation since March 2022, And just today I read the news that there was another blackout that jeopardized the nuclear safety situation not only in Ukraine, but in whole Europe and even in the world. As a consequence, all Ukrainians lived with the regular turn-offs of electricity the last winter and the spring. Every day we had no electricity and water supply for several hours in our homes and almost no street lights. Due to the missiles attack, Ukrainians have realized that the reliability of energy supply is very important. And currently, we don't have electricity from, if we don't have electricity from the grid, we pay almost €1 for 1 kilowatt hour of electricity from diesel or gasoline generators. And this costs 10 times more than energy from solar power stations. The government and the international community are doing a lot, organizing the restoration of infrastructure, purchasing generators, and providing electricity to the entire population of Ukraine. And we understand that renewables are not the only one independent solution for energy reconstruction and energy security, but they are already helping communities, and they have a future perspectives. That such communities that have solar power plants during the last winter, they understood the benefits and felt it. For example, last year in Zhytomyr, there were significant fewer power outages due to good energy management, energy efficiency, and the use of renewables. In addition, cities where water utilities have solar power plants, in the cities where water utilities have solar power plants, people could get water to their apartment even during the power outages. In the face of ongoing conflict in Ukraine, our NGO has partnered with local municipalities to adopt renewables in energy and critical infrastructure. Our collective aim is to ensure sustainable energy independence and resilience. Together with municipalities, we implemented renewable energy projects in 8 hospitals and working on water utilities. This includes identifying ideas and objects, clarifying the details of these ideas, preparing different types of technical documentation, and, if necessary, assistance in attracting third-party financing for communities, and also support during construction and commissioning. Working closely with municipalities has been crucial. They play a vital role in identifying the need and facilitating the implementation of these renewable energy projects. Together, we not only maintain essential service during power outages, but we also lay a foundation for green recovery and sustainable development. We work with communities all over Ukraine and them up to our partnered communities. And since the beginning of this full-scale war, we have built 8 solar power plants on hospital, to prepare 20 feasibility study for water supply companies, and prepared more than 30 different type of technical documentation for solar power plants in hospital. We also developed 12 feasibility study for heat pumps for district heating and hot water. This is the first hospital that Ecoclub helped to equip with solar power plant. It does not have batteries, but during the power outage, it can work together with diesel generators. This reduces the use of fossil fuels and also help hospitals to save money. Another important aspects of this that the city saw the benefits of renewable energy and decided to install the solar power plants on water utilities and finance it from their own budget. And the city do not plan to stop developing renewable energy. And on this slide, you can see the information about the first solar power plant that Ecoclub built. It was in 2020, and this is the solar power plant on water utility in the city of Voznesensk in Mykolaiv Oblast. At the beginning of the war, the city was in the midst of hostilities, and accordingly there were problems with electricity supply. Solar power plant helped to provide water even during blackouts. And as you can see, the city decided to build another, two additional parts of this solar power plant to provide the whole city with the whole residents with the water. And in 2022 and 2023, they increased the capacity. And finance it from their budget. In our experience, we have seen that it is already profitable to equip public institutions and utilities with solar energy, and it will help now and will work for a long time, saving the community's money and reducing the fossil fuel consumption and impact to the climate. This page contains information from our developed feasibility study for water utilities. And we considered the different scenarios for the installation of solar power plants. For example, a minimum supply of approximately 40 liters per person per day, and an optimal supply for more than 100 liters per person per day. We considered both solar power plants with and without batteries, and they will work, which will work only when the sun is shining. But all of these options will provide water to some extent, and even during long power outages. And if we calculate the cost of such solar power plant per community residence, it will be from €2 to 108 euros per person. It depends on the technology of these water utilities. And I would like to summarize my speech as follows. Ukrainian communities need help here and now. We don't have time to wait until after the war. Reconstruction has to start now. Renewable energy not only saves the climate, but also saves people from Russia. Decentralized energy helps local communities to be more independent from fossil fuels and suffer less from Russian missiles attack on energy infrastructure. We need to create stimulating conditions for the development of renewables and energy efficiency in municipalities. It is not only about the grants, but also about loans and other type of financial instruments. It is important to continue and strengthen decentralization. This is the one of the most successful reform in Ukraine, which influenced the ability of Ukrainians to resist Russian aggression on the beginning of the full-scale war. And enhancing awareness and professionalism among municipalities is essential. We believe that all financial help and all projects for communities should be provided with capacity building and with involvement of representatives from municipalities. The knowledge, trainers, and experience ideas after the implementation of different projects have to remain in the municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for such grounded presentation. And I give floor to Ms. Lyudmila Korotkych, lawyer and manager of the Crimea Anti-Resource Center.
Thank you, Mr. Babin. try to summarize our event and also will share with you of our perspectives of restoration of Crimea in context of achieving Sustainable Development Goals 2030. Since 2014, the beginning of the temporary occupation of Crimea, the homeland of indigenous peoples, Crimean Tatars, Karaitis, and Krimchaks, the territory of Crimea, has actually become a gray zone. All international organizations have stopped their work on the peninsula. Information from Russia is not accepted, and official Ukraine is not able to provide information for inclusion into the international registers and databases. Thus, only non-governmental organizations, and first of all organizations of indigenous peoples such as the Crimean Tatar Resource Center, became the main reliable source of information about the real situation on the peninsula. Approaches to the development of Crimea, ensuring its environmental safety and its role in the energy strategies of Ukraine and Russia are fundamentally different. While Russia has used and continues to use Crimea as a military base and springboard for continuing military aggression against Ukraine, in addition, the irrational use of resources has led to water crisis on the peninsula. In their own strategic documents, the occupation authorities recognize the impact of sanctions restrictions on companies operating on the peninsula, such as Chernomorneftegas and others. That is, for the last 9 years, Crimea has not had access to advanced technologies and approaches aimed at minimizing the negative impact of the climate change. The result of the occupation was the restriction of the inhabitants of Crimea to such basic rights as the rights to exchange information, which is also key to achieving sustainable development goals. Crimea also remains outside such international programs as climate action and biodiversity conservation. We see around the world how the lands of indigenous peoples as a result of colonial policies are being depleted by predatory mining of minerals. The full-scale war in Ukraine poses new threats and damages for environment. It influences not peace and security, but also our efforts to fight with climate change and food security around the world. For example, according to the research, for a full year of full-scale war in Ukraine, 119 million tons of dioxide of carbon equivalent were released into the atmosphere. 21.9 of them were emissions as a result of hostilities, and another 17.7 as a result of fires. Every day we have new challenges about some of which my colleagues will describe. It's such as explosion in Kakhovka, HPP, and other. And also my colleagues shared our opinion about qualification and way of investigation these crimes. And from the other side, the strategy of full-scale invasion eliminated at a new level the need and importance of social inclusion and social responsibility of business. Today, no one doubts that Crimea will be deoccupied in the near future. The government of Ukraine makes ambitious statements about the rapid recovery of the country and presents various strategies for integration and recovery. However, when we talk about Crimea, we must remember a few important points. Firstly, the presence of indigenous people, which requires a special approach. There are new broad discussion about recovery in Ukraine, but during these discussions, the rights of indigenous peoples are excluded or overlooked, especially the rights to self-determination, the rights to land, territories, and resources, the principle of free, prior, informed consent, in the context of reintegration and the post-war restoration of Crimea, and also in context of general green transitional and acceptable of principle of green economy. During the last 10 years of occupation, our land was exhausted by the Russian occupation administrations and business structures controlled by it. And now, when we are discussing post-war reconstruction, we have no right to repeat the mistakes of the past. This is a responsibility not only of the state, but also of investors who seek to invest in Crimea, invest in Ukraine in the future. Another important thing about which we should remember, Crimea has been under occupation since 2014, and the initial conditions will differ significantly from those in other areas. For example, there was no opportunity to apply the decentralization reform of Ukrainian that began in 2014 to Crimea, as well as many other important changes due to the occupation of Peninsula. My previous colleagues well emphasized the crucial of this reform of this decentralization. And these and many other reforms have to be implemented in Crimea after the occupation. But in the same time, while implementing these reforms, it is vital to remember that ensuring the involvement of indigenous people in the decision-making process and peace building is recognized as a key factor in combating climate change and ensuring the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. Such involvement can be ensured through the implementation of a free, prior and informed consent with a representative body of the indigenous people. It's imperative to recognize and prioritize the rights of indigenous people, and it's not only an ethical imperative, but a legal obligation to prioritize the rights of indigenous people in the process of recovery. Such an approach that is able to ensure the green restoration that Ukrainian seeks, and will also become the basis for the sustainable development of not only Crimea and Ukraine, but also for the entire region. Thank you for your attention.
And thank you, Ms. Korotkih. And I thank all speakers that presented their views regarding the issues of the ecological disaster that happened after Russia started its illegal aggressions against Ukraine, including issues of challenges for global warming. And now we have questions and answers, and we'll be glad to respond your questions regarding the aspects we highlighted. Thank you. Lady, you have answer. You have floor. Maybe you present yourself. Thank you. And then question.
I'm Nita Crawford. I'm a professor of international relations at University of Oxford in the UK. And my question is about international law. And in particular, you mentioned a number of ways to get accountability, but you didn't mention one treaty which I want to hear you talk about, which is the 1976 Convention on the Prohibition of Military or Other Uses of the Environment, of Environmental Modification Techniques. And Ukraine and Russia have signed, but Russia was one of the prime authors of this convention. And it seems to me that the irony here is patently obvious. So I wonder, the problem there is that deliberate acts are prohibited by the convention. Some of the things you've described are deliberate, and some of them are sort of consequences that are side effects of the conflict. So do you see the 1976 Convention on the Prohibition of Military or Other Uses of Environmental Modification Techniques as relevant here, and how might you use it?
Of course, and thank you for the question. Of course, it is relevant for those issues as other ecological convention. But here we have common challenge. Russia did not ratify those conventions. Russia signed some of them, but did not ratify. So it closed us possibilities of disputes, of solving disputes between countries. And as for me, as a practice lawyer, in some parts, we usually search the keys not where we lost them, but when the light is bright, shines brightly. That's the same situation. If there is a possibility for starting the trial, for starting the international proceeding, any convention should be applied. But if it is not, of course, we may discuss about this violation. Ukraine, as a ratifying state, may, for example, say about some derogations on Russia-occupied territories, as Ukraine have obligations regarding this convention. And we should discuss about the consequences of violation of this convention, not by Ukraine, but as a state on Ukraine's territory. But it will not be the interstate dispute, as some other conventions applied for this, including ESPO convention, yes, including convention of transborder impacts, including toxic transfer conventions. They are all applied to. But I may remind you the case, if you know, case Ukraine against Russia in the international arbitration regarding UNCLOS, United Convention on the Law of the Sea. As this convention is ratified by both states, but the destiny of this proceeding in the international arbitration is not so bright for Ukraine for this moment. That's why I think these specialized conventions should be extremely strongly elaborated for any activities in this area. And as for me, as a practice lawyer, I think, for example, I may give you an example, proceedings in United Nations committees, even including common committees like United Nations Committees on Human Rights, may be more fruitful on these issues. For example, it may be proceedings in the United Nations Commission of Racial Discrimination, as we're speaking about indigenous peoples. We're speaking about the collective rights on lands, etc. I may give you another example. It's now it is our internal case, but in our internal case, we have now disputes in Ukraine, in national court, regarding the bilateral treaty. Before Russian aggression, we have specialized bilateral treaty regarding the fishery in the South Sea. And before Russian broad-scale aggression, some Ukrainian civil society structures started a case in Ukrainian national legal framework demanding Ukrainian governments to ban this convention, to stop this treaty with Russia due to occupation of Crimea. And indigenous organizations like Majlis were the member parties of this case. Later, Ukrainian government initiatively banned this treaty because Russian aggression was broad scale, and this treaty was stopped regarding the Vienna Convention in the end of 2022. But later we got some national decisions of the Ukrainian courts in this case. In one of the decisions, Ukrainian court recognized the right of indigenous people to apply with legal demands regarding these issues. And this convention regarding fishery and fishery limits is a bit ecologic one, because it regulates the common ecosystem of the Sea of Azov. So I think it is not example, of course, a well-made international proceeding, but I think some cases like this may be developed in the future, and maybe also with convention appointed. And thank you for extremely fruitful question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellie from the Conflict Environment Observatory. So given that there isn't an internationally agreed definition of ecocide, but there is in Ukrainian like domestic national law, is this still useful? Is there a way that Ukraine can utilize this? And consequently, is it useful for other countries to have this law protective against foreign aggressors, if that makes sense?
I thank you. It's a very good question, because the destiny of Ukrainian ecocide legal concept is controversial. Why it is so? Because Ukraine, it was long before the Russian aggression, when Ukraine adopted new criminal code in 2001, 20 years ago. Ukraine established the ecocide crime on the national level as the international crime, but on the national level as crime against the international order. But there was not such mirror subject of the ecocide on any international treaty, and even in the resolutions of the international body. But where did Ukraine take this determination? It was copied from Russia's criminal code. But where Russia did take this recrimination? They just created them by themselves. It is not in compliance with the international law, but it was 20 years ago. It's not a guilty of Ukraine, of course. But now, when we're speaking about ecocide in modern condition, we have ecocide in our Ukrainian criminal law. We have other determinations in other criminal laws in 20 countries of state. Of course, not only of Russia, but of civilized nations. And in this situation, we may speak about the universal jurisdiction. We may speak about cases in Ukraine and other countries regarding the ecocide on the national law, but if we research the practice, we have controversial practice regarding ecocide. For example, we had some cases before broad-scale aggression connected with Russian legal usage of mineral sources of Sivas Bay in Crimea, of the illegal pollution of ecosystem by chemical plants of northern Crimea, but those cases were not finalized. And it was, like a procedural issue. Such cases and some other, like Clivage case, it is a very interesting case. It was investigated in Bakhmut, when Bakhmut was still a city, before Russian broad-scale aggression. Bakhmut police investigated this case on the article ecocide because on the Russia-occupied part of Ukraine, on the east of Ukraine, they stopped, legal so-called authorities stopped the coal mine activities, and groundwaters fueled these mines, And in one place, it was a place when it was underground nuclear explosion organized in Soviet period. And the concept of this case was that Russia illegal structures, by their illegal behavior, create risks that some nuclear reagents will be floated by water from this mine to the Donetsk River and then to Azov Sea. But later, Ukrainian government bodies requalified this case. They saw we don't see ecocide. We see just crime against nature. And a lot of cases that was started as ecocide in Ukraine were requalified. Why was they started by ecocide? Because it is very dangerous crime. It is simpler for investigator to start. It is simpler for investigator to have procedural aspects. But when you go to court, you should prove to Ukrainian judge, and we have judges in Ukraine, they're independent, that this is exactly not just a crime against nature, but ecocide, like an international or internationalized crime. It is a challenge. But now I heard we have some decisions in the courts of first level regarding ecocide, but they are not connected even with war. They're connected with legal, internal ecologic procedures. But anyway, issues of future development, we have connections with our investigators' bodies. They have official statements done in some press conference not far away months ago. They say they have procedures regarding some ecocidal cases, including the Kakhovka case. And we may hope that there will be some trials in Ukraine, and we may hope for some, for example, not on the first level trial, but for example, the Supreme Court of Ukraine's position regarding those cases. This is an absolutely real perspective of development of ecocide crimes cases. Thank you. So, if there are no more questions, I may thank you for attention. I may thank you for aid and support of Ukraine and Ukrainian ecosystems and global climate against illegal activities that we may alas see today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.